decent little largie there. So what's up, everybody? Today I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite baits for largemouth bass in the summer. It's a good start to my day, and let's get at it. Alright, so top 5 largemouth bass lures for summertime fishing. This is going to be a very debated one, being that bass probably have the most option of any freshwater fish. You know, I've done my top 5 for pike, I've done my top 5 for lake trout, I've done my top 5 for whitefish. There's not a lot of option to choose from. There is, but not to the same extent as bass fishing. Bass fishing is one of the biggest, you know, freshwater fish in North America as far as being targeted, not for size. So there's so much option to choose from. So narrowing down a top 5 is pretty difficult, and it's going to be debatable for a lot of people. But as far as summertime goes, I'm going to pick 2 kind of search baits and 3 slower baits for my top 5. So number 1 here is going to be a crankbait. So this one here is a Lucky Craft. It dives maybe 4 or 5 feet, and I run this one on the S-Glass crankbait rod. Right, McGill, I believe, makes this rod. The glass rod, I think, is very, very important when you're running treble hooks. It absorbs a lot of the shock, and you just lose a lot less fish with the glass rod. But as far as the crankbait goes, again, there's a ton of option in crankbaits. So when I'm fishing a crankbait, what I'm generally doing is trying to find fish first. I'll get on a weed line or, you know, a bigger area where these fish school up, but they're going to be all together in maybe a 1 kilometer stretch, where you just, you know, it's going to take too much time to cast something out and wait and cast something out and wait. I'm trying to find them first, and then I can slow down. So crankbait is a really, really good option for that. It's going to work well on, you know, kind of windier days, lower light periods, but you will catch them during the sun as well. Next, also, it's going to be a spinnerbait. So this is one of the most foolproof dummy lures that you could possibly throw. Yet fish eat them, and it's not only a numbers bait, it's a big fish bait. I caught a lot of big fish on a spinnerbait. All you're really doing is chuck and wind. You can do it a lot of different ways. You know, you can pause it, you can speed it up, you know, vary your retrieve speeds. But it's basically a chuck and wind bait, and you're going to catch fish on it regardless of the weather. But again, the more wind, the better generally for faster moving baits. So I'll throw this one a lot when I'm trying to find fish or when it's windy out. So next, I'm going to choose a flipping jig, jig and pig, whatever you want to call it. So this one here is made by Perfect Jig. Great little jig. I love the color on it. Chunk trailer. Now, this has been kind of a go-to for bass fishermen for probably close to 30 years, and there's a reason for it. One of the biggest forage for bass is crayfish, crawfish, craws, whatever you want to call them. And this is probably one of the best baits out there to mimic that. But I fish this on a really heavy rod, 65-pound braided line, and I'm going to use the jig. This one's the Archy Head. I like this one around shallow cover. If I'm fishing docks or shallow wood, you know, kind of a little rockier, sandier bottom, and it pulls through nicely. It's generally a good reaction bite. As soon as the bait falls, they're going to eat it. But flip it out, just kind of give it some shakes and hops, bring it back, do it again. Keep flipping, keep flipping. It took me a long time to get confidence in a jig when I first started out. Finally, I dedicated a whole week. I said, look, all I'm going to do is fish a jig until I get confidence in it. I caught a lot of 4 or 5 pound fish that week, and I've been stuck with it ever since. So next is going to be kind of a spin-off of the jig. So here I've got a Texas rig Chigger Craw. I also like the Imperium Baits Minotauro Craw, or just any Texas rig plastic in general. So this is going to give you a little bit more option when you're fishing weedier areas. So I've got a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight pegged here right now. It's going to allow you to really cut through the weeds better than the jig. It's a narrower profile. The tungsten's heavy. It's going to pop through. It's going to cut through. I like this one when I'm fishing either thick cover, you know, like the pads and stuff I have behind me, or if I'm fishing deep, thick weeds, like a thick milfoil or something like that, where you can punch it through. And again, it's just like flip, drop, lift, lift, bring it in, do it again. And this is one of my go-tos for the year. This is my favorite style of fishing anyways. Dunking deep weed and flipping shallow cover. Again, heavy rod. This is a 7/6. I like that length for the leverage to pull them out. And a 65-pound braided line again. Last one, people are gonna laugh. Gets a lot of hate in the tournament community because it's such a simple bait. Senko stick bait. This one here is made by Imperium Baits. It's the impact stick. It's one of my favorites. I have it wacky rigged, but it's probably the most versatile of all the baits here. You can wacky rig it, you can Texas rig it, you can weight it. You can weight it wacky, you can weight it Texas rig, you can fish it on a Ned rig. There's so many different ways to fish it, and bass eat it regardless of how it's rigged. It's such a simple bait, and I think that's why it gets a lot of hate in the tournament community, is literally anybody can throw it and catch fish. So I have to put it as #1 because it is probably the most heavily used and the most effective overall bass lure out there right now. So this one here I have on a 1/0 mosquito hook, wacky rigged right through the center. Just cast it out, let it sink. I usually count it depending on the depth. If it's 10 feet of water, I'll count to 10 or 15 and give it a couple hops and then bring it back in and do it again. 90% of your fish are going to come on the initial drop with this bait. And I've got this rigged on a spinning rod. This one's a 6/6 medium, I believe. 10-pound braided line to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader because I'm fishing clear water right now. If I was fishing around docks or out in the weeds, I would just skip out on the fluorocarbon leader. But I have been fishing some open water today, so I do have the fluoro. Fluoro is a great option. Just learn to tie the knot properly and you'll be good. There's so many honorable mentions I could make. You know, I love a topwater at this time of year as well. A jerkbait has its days. So many different options, but as far as my top 5 summer largemouth bass lures, that's them. I'll put links down below to all the gear that I use for this stuff, and hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.